So we're all here. We'll open the meeting of the West Newbury Selectboard for Monday, January 3rd, 2022. It's 7:17 p.m. Okay, so this meeting is being broadcast on both cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable TV channel and on the internet. For anybody who's watching this currently from afar and wants to connect to the Zoom meeting, you can dial in on 646-558-8656 with meeting ID of 822-2551-9769 and passcode 492032. And probably clear that coming in online, use the same meeting ID and the same passcode. So there's a series of regional vaccination clinics for COVID booster shots going on as we speak. Actually, there's one going on. And the next one, which I think is the final one, is for next Monday, the 10th. Is that correct? The 10th is the last one as far. I'm pretty sure it doesn't say that here specifically, but I think the last one is the 10th.
I believe more will be added.
Yeah, okay, but at least the last currently scheduled.
Yeah.
Is the 10th. As always, there is plenty of opportunity to volunteer on various committees. You can go to town website www.wnewbury.org/volunteer and peruse the site to see what committee openings there are. Please take a look at it. It's a great opportunity to contribute to the town. Thanks. You can also subscribe for email town news and announcements at the West Newbury website again, www.newbury.org/subscribe. I guess that's it for announcements. Okay. Yeah, so our first item on regular business tonight is a recognition of Kelly Scott for a donation of restored 1856 town map. This was a map, it's a topographical map of Essex County, drawn originally by a fairly famous map maker back in the mid-1800s. It was dated 1856. Kelly, I think you obtained it at an auction from Bob Lovejoy's estate, and who was a longtime resident of West Newbury on, I think he probably lived on Ash Street. So it's a pretty cool map, and it's had some restoration work done to it, and I think additional is planned. And so Kelly, wanted to say thanks for the donation to the town, and just curious what else you have to say about the map beyond what's in the packet here.
Well, that Bob Lovejoy was sort of a pillar in the circles that he ran in. Certainly in the animal, the near north and the animal shelter circles. He was known very much as an animal lover and an advocate for wildlife, such as the turtles along his property in Ash Street. He was instrumental in setting up systems to help them during their breeding seasons, which is actually how I met him as a science teacher. And then through our combined efforts at Near North, my husband and my family, we befriended him. He loved to show off this map. He was very much a part of his main living room. You can see, I know you guys got the slideshow that Lisa shared with you. You can see on the picture on that with the tape on it versus the picture of a map similar that would be taken from the Library of Congress, how yellowed that map had become, and how, sort of worse for wear because he used it as a teaching tool. I will also say that our own historical committee has used this particular map, not Bob's map, but this resource as a source for some of the research they have done in the not so distant past. So this is a map that is known to be important in terms of historical significance. For me, it's important on a personal level. I reached out to his daughter, Elizabeth. She goes by Beth. Was very excited to know that it would be available for the townspeople of West Newbury, the public in general, to be able to view on an ongoing basis. So this is about honoring Bob and allowing a primary document to be available to the town.
Great, neat. Yeah, that's great. It's cool that it's an original document from what, 170 years ago now, or close to 170 years ago. And it looks like the shape of West Newbury is the same now as it was then. Great, well, thank you. I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy glancing at it as they walk through the building here.
Yeah, so based on the dimensions, do you guys have thoughts as to where, where it ought to be presented most effectively? Or,
well, I think Historical Commission, represented here by Lisa Grammer, has some thoughts on that. So
we recommended the wall right outside this room, and Wayne, we did talk to him first before he said that they could do it, and it would involve obviously moving some of the pictures, ideally to the wall in between the two restrooms. But that seems like a good place. It would be a little bit protected, but it would really give people also an opportunity to look at it. And it's incredibly detailed. It has people's houses. It has the alms house. It has, and Kelly's right, it's great as a historical resource.
So has the
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can we have some kind of illumination? Does it need lighting to really appreciate it?
It's been in my house and I haven't unboxed it, so I don't know. It's a little bit funny and dark in there, but I don't know. And I wonder if we might wait. I mean, I hate to commit. You all would decide that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll even make sense to, because illumination then requires, might require new wiring and maintenance of the light. But is it possible there's a place in the hallway where there's already a light in front of it?
I take a lot of pictures of the pictures in the hallway, and it's glary and lousy light for that purpose.
Okay.
So if you really wanted something, I guess what I would recommend is if they have some battery powered lights that you can use, and that would be a lot easier and cheaper than.
That wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
So, but maybe we just start to see what it's like first.
Okay, great.
So do I understand we have permission to put it there, or do we need to vote, or do we need to do anything?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think you should vote on this, but we can. We just
it's good.
So that being the case, I move that we give permission to. Oh, Kelly, yes.
Sorry, if you're going to vote, I was just hoping. I've had a small plaque made that says donated to the town of West Newbury in loving memory of Robert Lovejoy, that maybe could go next to or near the map.
Okay, great. So I move that we, that the select board approve the mounting of the map as it's been, I guess it's going to be framed. Is that correct?
It is framed.
Oh, it is, okay, as framed, with the plaque that Kelly just described, on the wall, on a wall out in the hallway here. I guess the final location to be determined, but it'll be the exact location to be determined by that on the hallway, and illuminated, ideally with something that requires minimal wiring and minimal maintenance. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Oh, second.
Discussion?
I just had a question for either Elisa or Kelly. Will this need any long-term maintenance or, document preservation, special care, or is it just good to go?
So you could spend $7,500 to $9,000 taking it off the backing that it's currently on, unframing it, and doing an even deeper restoration. I mean, it's getting to be 200-year-old map. It lived in Bob's house for all this time. I guess I'm going to defer to somebody a little more expert than me, but I think that while it's here and while we have it, I think it would be, sad to keep it any longer in Elisa's spare bedroom and put it up for the world to see. And then I would be glad to, to look into further, projects if we thought it would need to be maintained or restored down the road.
But there is, it's framed and there's glass over it, correct? Oh, there's not.
No, there is no glass. And in fact, the restoration people actually talked me out of doing that because of the paper that it's on.
Okay. Okay, good.
If it were glass, it would weigh a lot more.
Okay, great. Well, if that be the case, we probably want to have a little sign that says, please do not touch as well. Would you think so? Obviously, it's seen a lot of touching already.
Dad, I haven't even seen it. Only Elisa's seen it, so I'm not sure how good it looks, but I'm excited.
Based on the comments about the tape spots, spots with clear tape over top, and the fact that it had been touched a lot.
The thing to remember, though, is that these maps were made to be folded and then to be used in classrooms and universities. They were made to be opened and shut and touched. So, I think that it is a testament to how long it has lasted at this point. But as I said, I would be absolutely open to further projects if people think it needs further restoration.
Okay, so that's something we can take. I mean, in the near term, we can get it up here and then we can talk over time. I'm guessing that there's going to be other discussion about whether or not there ought to be anything further done for preservation.
Maybe. I was at a museum over the holidays and one of the curators said, sometimes you just need to use old things.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we're ready to be a museum. I may be wrong, but so I would say try it and see.
Okay. Let's hope nobody takes a push pin.
Oh, our citizens would do that.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Just on that point, they would need something bigger than a regular pickup truck to cart it along. So it would be hard to walk away with.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I wasn't concerned about anybody stealing. I was just concerned about it. Additional wear and tear. So, but great. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Elisa.
Great. Thanks, Lisa.
Due to Wendy being remote, I have to do a roll call.
Oh, okay. So Wendy, you being remote, apparently we need to do a roll call.
Reed, aye. Just I have to do the roll call?
No, everybody.
Parker, aye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks for keeping us honest, Jim.
And there's no just I votes anymore.
Yeah, right. Okay. And our next item is a request for a waiver of 15-day waiting period for appointment of an interim COA director. Actually, Angus, I'll let you do
Okay, so as you know from the last meeting, or maybe the last two meetings, Teresa has moved on. We wish her every success. She's down in Hamilton. So we are working to ensure continuity of the office during the period that a new director is recruited and hired, and by the time they give notice and all that. I think we're probably talking about 3 months, potentially longer, but I think that's probably a realistic timeframe. So what my thought was to appoint an interim director, ideally if we had a candidate in-house. And so I posted it internally, and I would like to be able to make an appointment of an interim director. And so this is a request for the board to authorize that the waiver of the 15-day period that's included in the Town Manager Act. So at the time I'm sitting here right now, we've received 1 application from an internal applicant. And so after the passage of the 5-day posting for internal postings, I would like to make an appointment.
Great. So second. Discussion?
I guess I'm just wondering, is this going to impact other, the existing staffing load of that person?
Well, it would, yes. Yeah, obviously, yeah, for someone to shift down to that office would require, a reduction of current office's responsibilities or a reallocation of responsibilities. So that would be part of the adjustment that would need to be made.
Okay. And this is a full-time position, the interim, or are you going to have it be less?
Well, that's, this is the first time we've kind of done anything like this. So I you can see on the posting, I said contingent upon arranging for backup coverage. And I also said that some job requirements, including the position's working hours, may be waived or revised during this interim period. I wanted to allow some flexibility so that, people didn't need to feel that they should only apply if they could commit the full-time hours that Teresa had worked. So it gives some flexibility to, we need, ironically, we had been working back to the mid-fall at interim coverage of the office, not because of Teresa's departure, but because of continuing workers' comp issue and needing to have coverage down there. So at that point, I'd been working with members of the COA board and had met with the COA board, and we'd been aiming for office coverage 8:30 to 12:30 Monday through Thursday. So well less than the full-time hours. It was sometime after that we got Teresa's notice that she would be leaving for another job. So, if 2 years ago, it had been open full-time. More recently, it hasn't been because of a medical issue. So I think, my goal would be to have the office, the COA office, open Monday through Thursday, the full hours that the building's open. But that depends on, if we can do that and still maintain operations in the other departments.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
There is a meeting of the COA board this Thursday, so that's part of why I wanted to hopefully get this buttoned up. So when I meet with them on Thursday, I can tell them I know in my mind what I'd like to do, but I can't actually do it without this vote. So
Great, okay. So is there any further discussion?
No.
All in favor? Parker,
Reed, aye.
thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. The next item, regular business, is to extend the term of interim regulations for housing contribution payments and resale fees. And this is based on an agreement about a year ago, or a document from about a year ago from the planning board that allowed on a temporary basis until a housing trust is completely formed, allowed usage of I think it was up to $10,000 a year for various expenses related to the trust, and that agreement had an expiration date of December 31st of last year, And it needs to be extended in order for the availability of those funds to continue. So we've been asked by the town manager to extend that until June 30th of 2022, which is the end of this fiscal year.
Or until such time as the housing trust is formally established, whichever occurs first. So my reading, and I'll check this with town council, but my reading of the current zoning bylaw that establishes these funds, or that is the vehicle for these funds to be contributed, which is the inclusionary zoning bylaw. My reading of that bylaw is it was very clearly written in anticipation that a housing trust would be established. And so I think the bylaw as written, once the trust is formally established and the declaration of trust is recorded and the trustees are, seated and all of that, I think the bylaw as written would mean that those funds would automatically go into the trust. I will review that with council. We might have to do a housekeeping amendment to the bylaw to make that crystal clear, but I think it's already pretty clear. So once the trust is fully up and running, these funds will go into that trust, which is a much better vehicle to handle them. So it's really just to continue to deal with this interim period until that's formally up and running.
I had a question on this, Angus, on the interim regulations. It actually says until the town adopts the Affordable Housing Trust Fund pursuant to the Mass General Law. I mean, isn't that what we did at town meeting?
You did, yep. But there's no trust until a declaration of trust is recorded.
Right. I'm just wondering about the language here. It's
yeah, we didn't write it. Planning board wrote
it. Okay. All right. Well, I think your proposal of June 30th or until such time as the trust is established makes a lot of sense. So that would be my motion.
Great.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Archibald, aye.
Parker, aye.
Reed, aye.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so in consideration information we didn't have at the time the agenda was posted. I'd like to add an additional item, and it's regarding funding authorization to use for test kits that are being made available through a program by the state of Massachusetts. These are at a reduced cost because of negotiations by the state and buying millions of kits. And so I would move to add an item to our agenda, which we'll act on right now.
Second.
Any questions? Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Parker, aye.
Reed, aye.
Okay, so let me find the.
Yeah, you want me to? I can summarize. So the as people have probably heard, the Commonwealth has secured agreement with 3 different vaccine, or I'm sorry, the COVID self-testing companies to acquire them at wholesale rates, and they have, by extension, made that option available to municipalities to buy the COVID self-test kits at more affordable rates. And so the health director has requested, and I support this wholeheartedly, that we should proceed to do that. And we have the ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which we actually already have in the bank. We have a little over $700,000. And there's certain eligible uses. And as you know from prior discussions, we have a process ahead of us in how to best use those funds. But one of the allowable uses of the funds is to purchase these COVID test kits. So the request to the board is to, which is the decision-making authority with regard to the use of the ARPA funds. The request is to authorize the use of some portion of those funds for the acquisition of COVID, self-administered tests. There are a number of policy questions that I have, and I know, Paul has, and I'm sure his board has, on how would the test be distributed? Would this be for residents? Would it just be for senior citizens? Would it be for other, subcategories of residents? Would it be for personnel? Would it be for first responders? How would, where would they be housed? Would there be a back charge, or would they be given free? If so, how many? There's a lot of questions that I have. So I had thought this is something, we might have like 2 weeks from tonight, but you saw the email thread and time's of the essence. And so, I did think it was appropriate to bring that forward tonight. But I would totally, my advice would be, if you are inclined to support this, either set some dollar cap or set some policy parameters, or, I suppose you could table it, but I think the spirit of why it's coming forward on short notice is that these tests are in short supply. I'm sure most communities in the Commonwealth are looking at wanting to get in the queue. And so we'd like to be able to move quickly to at least say that we're able to buy them and to commit those ARPA funds. But sitting here right now, you saw the email thread. I have very little information, like what are they going to cost?
Right. Do we, because there's a range from $5 to $26 or something like that.
It's hard to plan when things are like $5 versus $30.
Yeah.
So, take an average, what was it, 5 and 20 something, 5 and 20 something. But so it's 5, say it's 5 and 25. So imagine the average test kit is $15. But I wonder how many we need. I think it's a great idea. I have no reservation about doing this. It isn't too bad we don't know a little bit more right now. Angus, do you know who it's pictured will actually make the decision as to whether or not there are discrete groups for which the tests are available, or available at no cost or something like that? I guess there's really been no discussion on that. Yeah.
I think it is. I think it's.
So is that then a Board of Health decision or a Select Board decision once the funds have been released for use by the Board of Health?
Well, I think it would be just your board's decision. But if you don't have that information, it's tough to, I guess you could authorize use of the funds to acquire them and then come back to pin down the parameters of.
I think
there's a lot of really tough questions
I
here.
think we come up with a cap on how much we can spend, and then we can talk about that, but we don't know if we're gonna get the cheap ones or the expensive ones or something in between. It's really a lot up in the air. And the one thing I will say is we would be purchasing them out of money that has been allocated to the community by the federal government. 120 towns in Massachusetts were given these. So we're actually using our ARPA funds for this, whereas some other towns actually got these cost free. So my only comment was that I'd like to, because of that we're actually buying them versus other places that aren't, that we somehow make it for West Newbury residents, but I don't know how we do that. Even doing that is gonna, even like, how do we prove that someone is who they say they are, they're not giving them to somebody in Wachusett, or I don't know, it's just, I'm being a little fussy about it, but I did think about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we want to make that decision right now.
I know, yeah. So just to throw a number on it, I'd say that we allocate $30,000.
So if it's $15 a kit, that's the average here. It's actually between $5 to $26 per kit. So the average is $15.50. So say $30,000 is just under 2,000 kits. And I don't think we need to subsidize kits for everybody in the community. So that should be plenty. hopefully,
I don't know if we'll get that many. Yeah,
yeah, maybe if we get that many kids.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Andover ordered 30,000,
Yeah.
15,000 kits, yeah. Yeah, I would be much more comfortable if we had some specifics on this. I mean, like how they're going to be used. Are they an alternative to PCR testing? Are they going to be used for quarantining? You know, does the Board of Health need to know tonight, Angus?
Yeah, I mean, you know what I know, Wendy.
All right, okay.
You know, they're scheduled to meet a week from tomorrow as a board. You know, Paul was out last week on some well-earned vacation, so we didn't have a chance to talk about it. And as you can see from the email thread, you know, this has been on our radar, and I had anticipated this is something we'd be working on in January. I had not, until I got the note, you know, earlier today, you know, late morning today. I didn't have any expectation this was going to be on for tonight. I have a lot of questions myself.
Yeah.
I don't know what we lose if we lose 2 weeks, but based on the urgency of, you know, Paul's note, I didn't want to sit on it. I don't want to, you know, put the community in a bad spot by losing potentially, you know, 15 days until the board's next regular meeting.
Yeah, so I would just make an observation. I know many of us have looked for kits and sometimes been successful and sometimes not in the last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. So my expectation, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, is that the availability of kits is improving significantly. There was a huge surge, I think, right before the holidays. Just from observation, my daughter went in to buy kits in drugstore yesterday, and there were many available, and there was not a lineup of people looking for them. It seemed as though, you know, the availability, at least in that instance, that snapshot was significantly better than, you know, than what we'd seen just a week earlier.
So there wasn't one. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was, I think, one of the CVS's in Newburyport. They did, I think that was where they were, and she called me and said, yeah, I should grab a couple more. But that, you know, so that was because a week before that, I personally had gone into a drugstore and got, you know, like 2 of the last handful of kits that behind a line of people that were all doing the same thing.
I wonder, could the board consider, you know, authorizing an appropriation of up to a certain amount with any tests so acquired, subject to, I don't want to say regulator, but I don't know, subject to rules or guidelines that this board would then adopt? Because I do think, I mean, you saw the advice, you know, from council on the use of the ARPA funds, they're grant funds, it's under your authority. I do think if you're authorizing the expenditure, it's totally, you ought to be hands-on with how these are handled, because there's going to be, you know, there's probably not going to be something that every last person will agree on. So someone has to take ownership, and it might just as well, in my view, be the chief elected board.
Yeah. No, I think that's perfect. I was trying to.
And then we can come back 2 weeks from now with some more.
They don't,
Yeah.
you know, they don't necessarily need to be accessible to everybody in town. But
Right.
many
Yeah, I
people
agree with that.
have
Yeah.
the resources, the availability, access kits, and that, you know, I think when the decision is made as to who gets them, that it should be limited to people who are more likely to not have them readily available or not have the resources for that, you know, for that as an extra expenditure. Like, so, you know, so Rowley, I think it was Rowley, you know, had,
It's Newbury.
or it was Newbury, okay, so they allocated them for, you know, seniors, veterans, and people on fixed incomes, which, you know, to me seems like a reasonable way to do things. You know, much of the demographic in this town doesn't really need help in the cost of it.
I would, you know, when the time comes, I will advocate that if the town acquires some kits, that some consideration be given to personnel as well.
Yep.
You know, sometimes, you know, who have to do the self-test in order to come to work.
Yep.
So I think that, and I know you consider that as well, so.
Okay.
So
I second your motion.
Rick, would you say that when you, say there is just the, maybe you're correct that things are gonna turn around, there's gonna be a lot of these available. If we had an adequate supply, would you say that I just don't know if we want to get into another thing where we're collecting money. So would you say that other people that say wouldn't qualify, but there aren't any available, would they be able to purchase them, or this one what you're thinking?
You purchase them from the town supply?
Yeah.
Actually, so we restate that.
In other words, if there is a significant shortage, and we were sitting on a whole bunch of them, and I understand your point about the resources and stuff that keep them from people that might not have that, but just in terms of availability at all, would they be purchasable by someone else in the town? It wasn't one of those protected groups. That's what I'm.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that if there was a shortage, that could be the case, but in reality, if we, with population of, roughly 4,500 people, if there were 2,000 kits available, and, each kit is probably the way it seems to be packaged now, is 2 tests per kit. But they're intended for one person, and we certainly share it with 2 people, each person getting 1 test. My point is that 2,000 kits is not really going to go very far here. So that's, in my mind, another reason why we sort of be discreet in who they're distributed to. So, because 2,000 kits is, 1 for every 2 people, or less than 1 for every 2 people. Half. So, but along the lines of where you were going, Angus, can I make an amendment to your motion that, that we go ahead with, that we approve an allocation of $30,000 for purchase of kits, but for the distribution to, to be, can we wait 2 weeks before? I mean, if you need a kit now.
Well, but we're not going to get them. I mean, obviously, this is through the state purchasing. It's, I don't think we would have them in hands
Okay, so
quickly. I don't know. I mean, you see this, it's all happening so quickly. There's a webinar this Thursday. I'm sure I'll learn a lot more, and I'm sure I'll learn more from Paul tomorrow.
Okay. So, well, then in the near term, they would be available if they're received before we're able to have further discussion. They'd be available to, to the groups of veterans, seniors, and people on fixed incomes who can somehow, we don't need their tax returns, but can somehow demonstrate that they cannot otherwise afford or obtain care.
I think I would, if the Board of Health is asking for this, or the health agent, I would like to see them propose how they want these to be distributed, rather than us try to figure it out on the fly here. I mean, it is a significant amount of money, and it just seems like this should be well thought out and planned so that we're not just, reacting and, I don't know. So I would ask them to let us know how they propose to distribute them. They have a better sense probably of the need within the town for something like this.
So, are you then suggesting that we not authorize the money at this point in time?
No, I think we can authorize it, but I just, I think the way that Angus phrased it is that, the distribution of the kits is contingent on some kind of plan or, some kind of,
Yeah, I guess my concern, Wendy, I think it said until we had further information, that I was trying to come up with something so that if we got the kits in a week, and I have no idea,
Well,
that it could be, I could be way, way off on that. But if we got the kits before,
But even if we did, I think, first of all, I think we won't. I don't know because it's happening so quickly. I don't know what the supply chains, I don't know anything about it, but let's say we got them in a week and let's say your meeting was a week later, it's a public resource. It's costing money, even though it's not local taxpayer dollars, it's federal money, federal tax dollars being used to acquire them. It's a public resource. It's being administered. There has to be a clear, like, you don't want, people in this building have to figure out if someone, has suitably demonstrated need. I think Wendy's right. There's got to be some clear guidance because we have to be fair. We have to be doing things in accordance with policy. And let's say we do get them in. My thought would be if we don't have some clear direction, we lock them and we leave them in a locked, room because we can't just be giving them out. And I can promise you, whether it's residents or staff or first responders or, I might like some kits, and the town manager wanted them, so we gave them the town manager. You can't have it doing that way. Because then it becomes, how many did you give out? Who did you give them to? What were the parameters? We need to now make sure our rules match what we already did. It's just messy. So, honestly, I wish the request hadn't come up on a half a day's notice, but since it did, I would rather see you act and put a check against, handing them out. At least that way we're not standing in the way of, we're not losing time.
Yeah.
But it gives us a reasonable amount of time to think through the details because there are a lot of
The only thing I was
details.
gonna say is that the governor did come up with delivering, however many there were, like 500,000 to the schools on Monday today. So they might have a store somewhere that these might show up Wednesday. I don't know. I'm just saying. It's
If we,
possibility.
just thinking out loud, we could always convene an emergency meeting of the board, if that eventuality
That's
came to
true.
pass. I would rather that than kind of willy-nilly, because if we get them, we're going to get requests
That's a good
immediately.
point. Okay.
and we're going to either have to say yes or no.
We've been getting requests now. People call.
Well, yeah, and we've had, within, there's been requests. So I think, I think what I'd suggest is to approve allocation of up to $30,000 for acquisition tests, subject to administrative rules for distribution to be approved by the select board. And if that's not the right motion, that could be amended at a future meeting. But I think for the time being, it allows us to move forward, at least to some degree.
yeah, I understand the goal is to get moving forward. It'll just be a shame if they end up getting here and sitting on it someday, but that's how, could be worse, could be if they don't get here. So,
But, even the question Archie asked about, could they be limited for West Newbury residents? Sitting here right now, I don't know the answer to that. It seems like there's information that you ought to know. We ought to
my
know.
guess is it looked like one of the other communities that had to be residents. I think they said residents, one kit per household.
So how do you do that?
Well, that might have informed how many they ordered. Well, and it looks like that was one of the towns that received them from the state, and they were only received from the state if they met certain criteria on household income and so forth. So I don't know if it's the same rules for us.
Yeah.
So Angus, would you prefer to come up with the guidelines rather than asking the,
No, I
Health?
think I totally agree with what you said, that
okay,
we ought to ask them to, to propose how they think they should best be used. You can see within the email thread, there's, the health agents set out certain ideas. I know the Board of Health meets next Tuesday. I think it would be really important for them to recommend how they could best be managed, assuming we do get them.
okay,
As well as whether 30,000 is enough money. They may say they think it ought to be some different number,
mhm,
but they're the best position to do this, or to advise on it.
yeah. So if they come back and say we actually need 60,000, then we would just schedule a meeting just to discuss that. If they are in short supply and we need to get our order in, I would prefer to have another meeting and satisfy what's needed for the town.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah, and with Rick's got a pretty flexible schedule, and with the Zoom option, it doesn't need to be a big lift to pull together a meeting on short notice if that's what's called for.
yep, okay.
So I just and I'm sorry I don't know more. I don't know I don't know anything more than what I sent around, because this all happened very quickly. So
Okay. All right, well, then, I'll withdraw my amendment to Archie's motion, and I think we have a motion and a second. And essentially, we're just gonna authorize $30,000.
Up to.
Up to $30,000, up to $30,000. All in favor? Parker,
I'm sorry, so we're going to authorize it, but what about the holding the distribution? Does that need to be part of the
aye.
motion?
We're just authorizing the funding at this point.
but I thought it was subject to rules for distribution to be determined by the select board. That was my understanding.
Okay.
I could be,
No,
That was mine too.
all right, this has drifted so far at this point that,
No, the whole plan is, we got some recommendations from the Board of Health, and we probably like them, but we might not. We might think that's ridiculous. So, we should get some, they're requesting it, so we should hear what they have to say.
okay. So maybe, Archie, could you restate what you think the motion should be?
Okay.
Have Angus read back what he said. I mean, I think he had it.
Motion to authorize the use of up to $30,000 of ARPA funds for the procurement of COVID self-tests, subject to rules for distribution of the kits, to be approved by the select board at a future meeting.
That's Archie's motion. Yeah, and I'll second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Archibald, aye.
Parker,
Read, aye.
And then I'll notify Paul and the Board of Health, and when they meet next Tuesday, presumably they'll come out with recommendations. And if there's something, if time is of the essence and that just doesn't work, I'm sure I'll know that within a half a day, and then we can look at a different approach. But I think that's the right action to take for tonight.
okay. Okay, so the next item is confirmed method of calculating accrual rates for qualified part-time employees.
Sorry, I'm just taking my notes here.
No problem.
So, this is, I've been thinking about this really as a administrative issue, because in my reading, the policy intent is clear, but it's now gone on so long and it's been put in writing, and it's very clear that policy intent is not clear, and that there's some some number of people who read it differently, the issue being really whether the accrual is based on a certain number of hours or whether the accrual of a sick day is a day, is a day, is a day, regardless of what your, scheduled hours are. So, yeah, so like I said in the memo, I do think that in fairness to everybody, it would be appropriate to actually bring forward clarified language in the personnel policy. That way, everybody can say their piece, the board can hear the different points of view, you can set policy based on what you believe it should be. So I guess what I would look for tonight, if the written materials are clear enough for you to do this, is to give some direction that if I and my office are drafting proposed clarification of policy, would your intent be that basically codify how me and my staff, my finance department are reading it, which is that the prorated accrual that applies to vacation would also apply to sick, or do you see the other point of view that if someone's longest day is an 8-hour day, that they get 10 8-hour days, even if their work week is, say, 24 hours. So, and if you don't know enough tonight and you want to think about it more, that's fine too. When it came to my attention recently that this was because my office was, Jenny was doing year-end reconciliation of accruals and realized that some number of people are still using this old number. So that's when I said, I need to get an answer to this.
No, so speaking for myself, I agree with what you suggested, or what has been suggested here, and that it should be prorated based on the percentage fraction of a 40-hour average, an average 40-hour week that the employee works. And I think, in the near term, we can define that through a vote tonight, if that's what everybody agrees with, and that we should add wording to the sick leave portion of the personnel policy to make that clear and clear. Because it doesn't make sense, to me at least, that, limit cases if somebody works 40 hours and, they get 10 days per year, and somebody who works 20 hours would also get 10 days per year. Effectively double the rate of sick time, of allowable sick time per hour of actual work. It just doesn't stand to reason.
Wouldn't we have to have the 14-day notice if we're going to change or add this to the personnel policy?
Yes, I think it's 10-day notice. So if we were going to try to get this on for the 18th, if we got something out in the next 2 or 3 days, I think that would meet the 10. Although I don't think it's a huge hurry. I mean, we could do it for January 31st meeting. Yeah. But yes, I would consider, if you're changing, if you decide that you agree that the policy language should be clarified, then yes, that would be a change to the personnel policy and would be subject to the posting and notice requirement to amend the personnel policy.
My only question is, we're not really changing anything. People are just doing it wrong.
That's not a
change.
That's been my, in terms of the second part of what you said, I don't think it's quite as simple, just because what I'm told, and I believe, is that prior finance directors have blessed this approach. So by saying someone's doing it wrong, what I'm told is that the so-called front office has told them that was the policy. So I do think there's very clear, disagreement as to what the current policy is.
Well, the current policy is ambiguous. It can be, depending upon how you interpret things like the definition of a day.
Right.
Is a day your average work day? Is a day your actual workday as opposed to your average workday? Is it, you know, I mean, there's numerous ways you can interpret that. And it's just not clear. So, you know, it just needs to be made clear what the intent is. You know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't, you know, as I said in the June 8th memo, you know, when I wrote that memo, I did not in any way view that as changing policy.
Yeah.
It was intended to clarify policy, and in fact, back in August of 2018, you know, my second month, I mean, that's how long it has actually been going on longer than that, but it came to my attention pretty early on.
Yeah.
Because one of the first questions I asked my finance staff was, why don't we have the accruals on the actual pay stub? I'd never seen an organization that do that. And, oh, well, it's very complicated. So I brought a memo to the board in August of 2018, setting out the accrual for qualified part-time employees and the actual math and the actual multipliers. And the board, you know, agreed that night with how I was reading it. But we didn't, until this, you know, a couple of years later when I wrote that memo, it didn't, you know, I don't think it was presented to staff clearly the way it should have been.
Yeah.
So that's what the June memo was intended to do. I actually wrote that mostly in January, and then with COVID, it just kind of got pushed aside and it didn't get finalized, circulated to June. But it was, again, it was fiscal year end. We were looking to get to reconcile the finance department records of accruals with different departments' records of their own accruals. So that was the impetus for it in June. And I thought that memo kind of cleared it up. And at the time I was aware that some number of people were unhappy with the reading. And that's when it was brought to you guys in August, late August. But then I think that was a really busy meeting and we didn't get to it. And now here we are. So I think a clarification of the language in the policy would be the right thing to do. In the meantime, in terms of whether it takes effect or not, it really, all that speaks to is whether someone's tracking of their accruals is going to reconcile with the finance departments or not.
Well, I would think one thing, if there are people that have you know, a disagreement on what there is, maybe they're grandfathered in, whatever they have. But going forward from 1 second from today, the new rule is absolutely totally enforced.
And that's the position that my office took in June. We didn't ever try to reach back and take back anyone's sick time. And, you know, in one of the instances, the person has 530 hours of accrued sick time, which based on a part-time schedule is basically like 2/3 of a year of sick time. So it's not, the issue isn't the balance. The issue is that it's a perceived, well, I think I said that it would be perceived as a take back of an employee benefit. Personally, I don't think that's a fair perception, but it's very definitely a perception.
I don't, no one could argue that this isn't the right way to do it.
Well, I think by making it a personnel policy change, we're giving ample opportunity for staff to comment and make their, you know, their position heard. I think that's the right way to go about it. Not that I don't disagree with you, Archie, but I feel like it's important if people perceive that something's being taken away, they at least should have the opportunity to explain why, and there should be a conversation about it.
I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like, unless anyone has anything different, it sounds like that the direction would be to draw up a clarification of the current policy that basically codifies, you know, this prorated approach, and then advertise that and post a hearing, whether that comes together for January 18th or maybe the next meeting after that. All depends on how this week goes. But it sounds like that's the direction we'll go, and then we'll, you know, it may even be better to do the 31st just to make sure everybody, you know, has plenty of time to provide any comments. because between now and then, it really isn't, there is no effect in the real world. It's just a matter of whether someone's spreadsheet matches someone else's spreadsheet.
Okay,
Because
Yeah, that's
there's
good.
no one who's like, floating it with no sick time remaining. That's
Yeah,
not,
it's-
that's not the
it's been
situation.
going for this long and it's, I guess, because W-2s are going out, there probably are things that have to be accounted for here. Is that-
No, the only time there's anybody outside the finance department looking at accruals is with the audit, because we have to report on the financial, those accrued absences and what the financial, that shows up as a debit on the town's books.
Yeah,
But other than that, no, it's nothing nothing to do with taxes or calendar year ends. It's just part of the practice to routinely reconcile. And actually, I'm sure it came up because with the board's extension of the use of vacation time, FY21 vacation time till the end of December, I know that Jenny was looking at specific employees to make sure they weren't going to lose any vacation time. And in the context of that, probably was saying, our balances show X, Y, and Z. And that's when it came to light that, oh, wait a second, what do you mean? The sick time should be X plus 3.
yeah.
I do understand the point of view of somebody who's working, let's just say theoretically someone worked 3 8-hour days. And if they're taking a sick day, or that's an 8-hour day. And so if they're, getting 48 hours of sick time a year, that is only 6 days. So I totally understand it from like an English language standpoint,
Yeah.
but from a policy standpoint and this whole inverse, the less hours you work, the more relative sick time. That's where it just doesn't hold up to me.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I understand that, and then there's a side that doesn't, in the sense that it's that, each, sick days are intended to make it so that you don't lose pay for work days that you've missed, and that should be sort of an equal benefit to each person. So if you lose 5 days in a week and you work 5 days in a week, you're fully compensated. But if you're 3 days, if you work 3 days and then you still get 10 sick days, you can now be out over 3 weeks and get an enhanced benefit because you're only part-time. And that isn't, it seems to me that that's not fair to the people who then work full. Yeah, and it's too bad that it's probably long for so long.
It's incredible, honestly, that it's a long history on this one.
I think we're,
Yeah, no, I've got the direction I need, so we'll draw up, some revised language.
okay. Great, okay, so next item is a review of the draft wetlands bylaws received from the Conservation Commission.
It would have been helpful to see what was changed from the last time around. But I mean, I wonder, could we compare documents? You can do that in Word, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we could definitely do that. Put together a compare and merge. That would be
Yeah.
helpful. Maybe. He said the Concom may have a red line, but yeah, we have the version that was proposed last spring, and we can ask them for it. They have it, great, but we could create that very easily.
There were concerns raised by the select board. Then it'd be good to know if they've been fully addressed.
You say that again, Wendy? Sorry.
I was just saying that there were concerns the select board had when this was brought up the first time, and it would just be good to see how they were addressed in the language. I don't recall what they were, at this point.
Okay, so Archie actually had most of the concerns last time, and Archie is just saying that he has some now, and I see some red ink on his page. So maybe we should just talk about issues that are concerned.
Okay. My first, the messages go in the, there's no sense in jumping around, so just, Roman numeral 2, is sort of what I had the biggest problem with before, and that continues to be my biggest, problem. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8th line, 7 or 8th line down, where it talks about the jurisdictional land adjoining those streams, and then called intermittent streams. Well, I think that this is a really big problem for the town of West Newbury, to call those streams, because that conjures up images of a Orvis commercial with someone fly fishing in waders in Montana, and that's not what these are. These are intermittent drainage areas that were artificially created by the construction of the road. The land was where it was. The road was built up, and the road is also impermeable, so with a crown on it, so any liquid that goes on the road is thereby transmitted to the side of the road and then into the lower area next to the road. And West Newbury is notorious for having very clay containing soils that don't drain very well. So to call these streams is really a stretch. So why is this so important? So if you continue reading that sentence, the jurisdictional land shall extend out to a distance of 100 feet from those lands. So with my hand, I wasn't able to draw I can't draw well, so I go do stuff ahead of time. So what I'm going to show you is a typical Form A lot. So 80,000 square feet. And I have to also mention that if this was a Form A lot that actually had more than 200 feet of frontage, so we have the road, and here we have the frontage, and the dotted line area here is where the lowest point of the swale, where the drainage area would be. So 100 feet up from there would be 100 feet up, 200 feet of the frontage along the road. So that would be 20,000 square feet of a typical Form A lot would be subject to any kind of work in that area would be subject to sending an application to the Conservation Commission. So not only would this be an unbelievable burden to homeowners, but it would create massive amounts of work for the town and the Conservation Commission. So this is 20,000 square feet out of a typical 2-acre lot. That is 25% of the total land area of a lot. In that area, if you read the document, one of the things it says you can't do is remove any vegetation, trim any trees, or trim any shrubs. This is gross overtake of governmental authority over property owners, that they can't, if there was a driveway here and there was an overhanging branch, they have to get an application to the Conservation Commission to remove a branch hanging over their driveway in a significant portion of their property. This isn't just like 5 feet, this is 100 feet up from the swale. So think about that, 100 feet, that's like right by, a lot of houses aren't more than 100 feet from the road. So this is an incredible stretch and grab of municipal authority over property rights. You have to read it, but so that's the 100 feet from the drainage ditches is a massive. So how prevalent is this in West Newbury? So at present, there isn't any maps of the areas that have water containing swales in them by the town. But last week I took a half an hour and drove around just random, absolutely random streets. So this is in no way comprehensive or indicative of how many properties will be affected by this. But for example, I went on half of Middle Street and there were 11 properties I saw that would immediately be affected by this. It's on the water and right near their driveway. And so Middle Street Road. So I went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just 7 streets in West Newbury. Granted, some of them I knew would be more wet than others. I went down Ash Street, for example. But that was 51 total lots. And so I only drove around for half an hour. So I'm assuming there's probably a few hundred properties that would be affected by this proposed bylaw. So let's just read under what kinds of things that are trying to be eliminated by this proposed bylaw. Definitions, section H, destruction of plant life, but not limited to cutting or trimming of trees, shrubs, or other vegetation. So a property owner can trim their arborvitae without doing one of these applications. That's ridiculous. Item K says other things that would be limited are incremental activities which may or may have, not even may, but may have a cumulative adverse impact on the resource areas protected by this bylaw. So I could interpret that as someone saying, okay, you can't shovel the snow from your driveway into the swale because the driveway has been salted and sanded. That would have an adverse impact on the resource area right next to your driveway. There's no question. If you're shoveling your driveway and it goes into the swale, that would be, someone could interpret that as an incremental activity that is damaging the resource area. So that's my big thing is that calling these areas intermittent streams is a big jump in a really bad way. And then I have a lot of technical problems with some of the things, and some of the things that were noted by Mike McCarron in last spring, but that's my big issue with this.
I guess that's why I wanted to see the original version, because what's described here, Archie, is what the state law already protects. I mean, many of those intermittent streams, if they are delineated as a wetland, all these regulations apply according to the state regs. So
they're not streams.
Well, but they're wetlands. So if it was a stream, it would be 200 feet. And I think originally they had 200 feet for this intermittent stream. And I think they brought it down to 100, which is what the the state regulations already provides for.
They're artificially created. They only exist because the road is there.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue, I'm just saying, I mean, many applications that come before the Concom, those intermittent drainage channels that run along the road are delineated, and the activities 100 feet from those are regulated by the order of conditions. So this isn't anything new. I think they reduced the land coverage from 200 to 100 feet. So.
Archie, so what's your perspective on, say, there was a natural stream, a road was built. The road effectively now creates a dam. So the stream runs along the road until it gets to a culvert, in which point it goes underneath the road, and then maybe it runs along the road on the other side. Should that be treated like a stream because it was a stream beforehand, or should it not be treated like a stream?
I would assume that's a gray area. I'm not sure, because some of it would have not. The road is artificially focusing the water all in one area, which otherwise might have just dissipated in a field. It's full. The road is say 3 feet higher than the swale. Just to pick a number, and it's otherwise that water would disperse, say, over this table, but it can't get over the road, so it keeps going in a narrow channel.
So
I don't know if these are streams. I find that use of that term is I don't know. I think it is. I just think it's way overstretched of what we're trying to do here.
what if there were areas that were defined as streams? I mean, there are places, and I'm grasping, trying to think of a specific one I can name right now, where I know the stream runs down to the road and then along the road and then crosses under the road. I know picture one, can't think of where. But there are places where clearly they are streams. They've probably been streams since the road was built, or perhaps long before the road was built, and maybe were redirected by the road. So should that not be treated as a stream, or so I think, I mean, I guess I'm fully understanding in some areas, where you have something that is really is a swale, and it redirects water that.
Okay, I didn't think you might be familiar with this one. Before you get to the coming up from coming up Crane Neck Street, before you get to Middle Street, On the right-hand side, there's a couple of houses, one is, there's some horses and stuff on, before you get to the street farm. On the right-hand side there was certainly one of these areas that I noted. And that just doesn't look like a stream to me, but it's, the depression is quite significant there. And that certainly there's no stream further uphill, and certainly none where none as far up as Middle Street, and yet, you know, there's a big depression down there, and there's water there. That doesn't seem like a stream.
Well, I mean, I live on Gray Neck, and I'm trying to figure exactly the section you mean, but.
Between the stop sign on Old Georgetown and up to
Up Middle Street.
up to Middle,
Yeah, so that's, it's pretty deep.
Pretty
Well, you
deep
get what we call,
culvert.
as you call it, country drainage with culverts wherever there's a driveway or some other access off the road. And then you get down to where it flattens out or any power lines, and the stream exits and fans out and underneath the power lines and feeds into a wetland.
Yeah, I see this sentence as addressing your concern from last time, Archie. Because originally it said 200 feet. And so what the change they've made, it's now just consistent with the state regs. It's just treated as a wetland, and 100 feet is, if the soils are indeed, you know, qualify as wetland soils.
But
I mean,
but the idea even that someone can't trim their shrubs within 100 feet of the road with this situation is, that's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy, did you have something you wanted to add to what the audience speak? The only person in the audience.
Hi.
Hi.
I guess I can say that. I'm Nancy Powell at 86 Middle Street. I made to run upstairs because they're talking about the bylaw up there as well, and I actually wanted to go up and try to get some clarification with the Conservation Commission on some of the components. But I guess I just wanted to say that I think it's good for the town to have a bylaw, you know, in place. The Conservation Commission has done a great job protecting the wetland resources in town, and this, you know, should help with that. There are some components of this that I think does have some significant impacts and does differ from the state regulations, and I'm hoping that there'll be an opportunity for further discussions as to the emphasis and the need for these changes and what the impacts will be for landowners before this goes to the town meeting. The town meeting is probably not the right place to have those kind of discussions. So, you know, I'm hoping to get a little bit more insight upstairs at their meeting, but I'm hoping that we'll have opportunity to have those discussions. You know, I had some questions relating to the vernal pool changes and some of the consultant services that I think will be a significant burden to landowners as well. And, you know, and I think those are justifiable where there is a need, and I'm just trying to understand the need in this instance.
yeah, Nancy, they had a public hearing. The Conservation Commission had a public hearing the last time it was proposed. Because this is being re-proposed, I'm not sure if they're going to do that again, but I would definitely make them aware of that, because you're right, town meeting is not the time to try to debate this.
Okay, yeah, no,
Yeah,
that'll be
yeah.
great.
Yeah, going to town meeting and having a debate like this is a certain failure.
Yeah, and I do, on the issue of process, I do want to emphasize this. I think we are really at the beginning of the process. I know that Concom has been working on this for a while and working on updates from the bylaw it had proposed last winter and spring. You know, I was glad to get it by the end of December because that allows us to get it into the queue and there's going to be, I think, multiple discussions both at the Concom, at this board, leading up to, you know, any town meeting vote. It's not a zoning bylaw, so it doesn't require a public hearing like a zoning amendment does, but there's, you know, I think a public hearing on something like this is always good practice because, you know, regardless of what's proposed, you know, if there's going to be a significant impact, it's, you know, I think it's incumbent on the town to let people know what's under consideration. But one thing that in the transmittal from the conservation agent, you know, the commission had, their intent was that this draft that's in front of you tonight not be sent out for legal review, because I think they know that there's going to be adjustments to it. And prior to putting it through the whole legal review, they wanted to hear from people so they could make adjustments. Obviously, you know, you could refer it to legal review now and again 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But the point is, it's very much a moving, you know, it's very much a draft that's there for review, and that's why it's on for tonight.
So I'm curious, Archie, you say in the case of something like that, is there a contract with the owner? Nancy, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Not trying to put the onus on you, but is there like sort of an alternate? Do you think that that it's like fatally flawed in that area, or do you think there's a way to modify what's intended there? And this isn't the place where it's going to happen, but I'm just curious.
Well, suppose this jurisdiction is immutable, that they can't compromise on that, then the number of things that are the term alter shall include have to be trimmed, just like shrubs have to be trimmed. There's no, the number of things that if you recall when in the spring, I asked Judy Meisner if putting in a new mailbox would require having an application and stuff, and she actually said yes, that something as small as putting in digging a hole and putting in a new mailbox would be a violation without so that's the extent of this, and how much that this is going to be an immense burden to homeowners and also to an incredible increase in the workload of the Conservation Commission. If people are actually making all these applications, so every time someone does something to their driveway, they would have to do that, because in some fashion it would alter. You know, it's very broad in scope into what would affect the resource area is what we're talking about, and there's no room for any compromise as far as I can see.
Maybe it would be helpful if we ask the commission to highlight what is more strict than the state wetland law. Because Archie, a lot of this is already covered in the state and we already have to do it.
I've actually looked at the state law, yeah. But things like item K is like an unbelievable catch-all. Incremental activities which might have a cumulative adverse impact on the resource area. Boy, that's like anything.
Angus, do you think that's something that the commission could do, is just highlight what is more strict? I mean, then at least we're only focusing on the things that are new or in addition to the state regulations.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking at, I know that the commission used as a base the model, so-called model bylaw that the Mass Association of Concoms put out. And I've got that up on my tablet, and I'm kind of looking at it side by side. And, you know, for instance, that language that Archie just referenced is straight from the model bylaw. That doesn't mean that's straight from the state law. I don't know the state law like that. I think that's a very, you know, good question to ask, is how much of this is implementing the state law and how much of this is going beyond it.
But think about where we are. A lot of towns don't have so-called streams next to their roads. They have catch basins, they have stores, or they have a paved curb, and they have a gutter. So this is, West Newbury doesn't have any curbs. It has, the roads all drain down, and this is going to have much more of an effect in our town than, say, it would in I don't know, Somerville. They don't have swales.
Yes.
So this is going to have much more of an impact here than it would somewhere else.
I can't disagree with that. I guess what I point out though is that, you know, so there are elements of West Newbury's environment that make it what it is. And I think, and I'm not denying that there are things here that probably should be changed, but in general terms, you know, comparing ourselves to, you know, a city that's all built up on, you know, with catch basins and culverts and, you know, all hard infrastructure. You know, part of what makes the vibrant environment is the fact that we have all these things to protect. And I think that's the point of this, is trying to protect those natural assets. And, you know, and sure, there may be overreach in places, but, you know, I guess I don't feel damned with the whole thing.
I'd like to mention, so that's the sort of where I'm coming philosophically related to it, but there's some sort of technical things that I think we should all talk about too, is that the regulations that can be promulgated by the Conservation Commission, we don't know what the application fees would be. We don't know what the fines would be. It gives them, the Conservation Commission is giving itself the complete authority to enforce this bylaw. And if it says, and then again, one of the comments written by legal counsel, that upon request of the commission, the Board of Selectmen and the town council shall take legal action for enforcement under civil law. So an unelected appointed board is telling the select board what to do. A big problem now. It says shall. That's not. It's not appropriate.
Yeah. And also,
Archie, where are you reading from?
That particular one is section Roman numeral 12 about enforcement, about halfway down.
Okay, oh, I see.
yeah, that was in that memo from Mike and Karen,
Right.
from back a couple of years ago.
See, and item 9, regulations, at a minimum, these regulations shall reiterate the terms defined in this bylaw. So this is the regulations the Conservation Commission will come up with. Define additional terms and requirements not inconsistent with the bylaw. Provide for undisturbed vegetated buffers extending from the edge of the resource areas and impose filing and consultant fees. So imagine somebody has, they've got, I don't know, daffodils here, and they want to put some jonquils next to them. They have to do abide by this. I understand the intent and it's good, but I think there's some areas that are just massively overreached.
Yeah, it seems like it needs to be massaged based on specific, it's going to be difficult to adjust it specific to each independent location. And things change foot by foot.
I'm assuming that if someone say had, but even this wasn't clear to me, and this is one thing I really want to have cleared up before this comes to town meeting, is if this was an area, say, where, okay, someone's house is close to the road, I don't know, the house is right here, say, and they've got they have a mowed lawn in front of their house. Will the ability to mow that lawn be grandfathered in? Doesn't say anything about things being grandfathered in, so I'd like to know that.
That is a very pertinent question for sure, both for the reason that you asked in terms of impact on existing, we'll call it disturbance within the buffer zone, but also on permitting. As you probably know, zoning bylaws are grandfathered, applications are grandfathered if they're filed prior to the date of town meeting. General bylaws are not. So this is something, Michelle Green, the conservation agent, has brought to me with a question that she has, that she's getting from prospective applicants for orders of conditions that are either before the commission presently or are anticipating filing in the relatively near term, is to, if they don't have a permit in hand at the time, if something goes to town meeting and is adopted, would it affect them? And I think unless a bylaw had a specific grandfathering section added, and we'll check with legal counsel on this, obviously, but I think that it would apply to an application that was in process as of the time of vote. So I do know that is something that we need to know that one way or the other, because if that would be the effect and there isn't a date of effect built into the bylaw, that could mean that projects that potentially would have been in the permitting process for, upwards of 3 or 4 months would then have to go back to the start. So if that is the case, I think the answer would either be to put in a date of effect that clarifies that it only affects going forward, or to be really proactive on letting every applicant or prospective applicant know that this, because this could set back their permitting timeline by, months. Obviously people are looking ahead to construction season for spring and summer and so forth. So I do think that there's some, the town has to be transparent on what would be the impact so that people can plan accordingly.
Seems to me like if you're already in the permitting process, then, that should be it. You shouldn't have to go back. But I think it should be spelled out, you're right.
Yeah, if it was a zoning bylaw, the law would be clear. With the general, it's not.
Yeah.
But
Is that a state law?
yeah, there's no grandfathering from a general bylaw. So, this comes up like when I was in Westford and we adopted more stringent sign regulations. That was a discussion of if you do it in zoning, it's only going to apply prospectively. But if you would do it under a general bylaw, it would apply to existing businesses who could then be required to remove their current signage and bring it into compliance. So you have to decide what do you want to do and how much of a, but yeah, we will review that with legal counsel. I didn't send that question off to them yet, but that is a question that the agent has wondered about.
So Angus, do you know what they're expecting from us at this point? Just kind of general first reaction or?
Yeah, I think that's probably more than they would expect. It was sent,
Okay.
As you can see, Michelle sent it broadly to a lot of departments. She's, trying to get the word out. This is proposed. I let her know I'd put it on for tonight's agenda just to get it into the mill for discussion. I don't think anybody's looking at tonight as the board's like end all be all, last word or anything close to that. It's really to start the discussion. And I think, we've identified some good items. There's a couple of very clear follow-up that's, we can put together. We can either obtain from the Concom or put together ourselves if they don't have it, a markup showing how this differs from what was proposed last spring. But also, we do have this MACC model bylaw. We could do a compare and merge with that. And so we could see how the proposed local bylaw differs from what MACC has offered as a model bylaw. And I would be inclined to agree with, the idea that we probably shouldn't send it out for, detailed legal review until we're closer to a form that's likely to be proposed, whether that's in 3 or 4 weeks or 2 months or something. But it seems like it was offered as kind of an initial draft, and it may be too premature to have KP do like a close read of it at this point. I know they would be willing to do so. They'd be happy to do so, but rather than have them do that at 2 or 3 times through the process, it probably makes sense to do it a little later in the process.
Angus, I would also like to see maybe Michelle just highlight things that are stricter than the state law. I mean, the MACC draft, the template is stricter.
Yeah.
So I think most of what's here came directly from that. There may be 1 or 2 things, but just so people understand that this is not like an entirely new thing that the Conservation Commission is pushing, that much of this is already in place by the state.
Yeah, no, I've got that in my notes from earlier. I've got a little star next to it, so that's my.
Okay.
The morning after the meeting, I go through it with a star, and that's what I make sure gets done. So.
Okay, great, thanks. It would be good too if they have another hearing. I don't know what their plan is, but I think that would be helpful so that questions get answered prior to town meeting. I think only 2 people came last time and both were in favor of it, so there wasn't really much of a discussion.
There were the one comments from Greg Hockmuth. I don't know if he showed up at the hearing or not, but he had put some detailed comments on file.
No.
Yeah.
There was one other person that had some comments besides me. I can't remember.
Greg Hockmuth,
Okay.
the wetlands. He does a lot of the wetland consulting work.
No, I see your concern. I really love the long roadway. Seems like there's a way to tweak that to make it reasonable so that there are places where it's applicable, but many places where it's inappropriate.
Okay, good. Yeah, so this will be, you'll see this on, plenty of future agendas. I'm sure of that.
Common performance evaluation discussion of 2022 board priorities. So each of the three select board members filled out a performance evaluation, individually, and then I sort of aggregated or compared that information and reviewed it and with Angus this afternoon and talked about it. And I guess I would say, and in general terms, it's all highly favorable. There were, categories range from commendable to satisfactory to needs improvement to unsatisfactory to unable to judge, and which of course means nothing. But if there were a total of 100 blocks to check, I think probably 95 of them were commendable and 5 were satisfactory, or maybe it was 120 to 5. The consensus was that Angus is doing a really good job, but he's doing it under really difficult circumstances where there are difficulties in our form of town government that make it virtually impossible to operate as a manager, because besides being a manager, he also has to function as a finance director, which is a full-time job on its own. And you can't fall down and be a finance director, because if you do, the town fails financially. I haven't aggregated it all, which I had intended to get to before tonight. I guess I think the consensus, certainly from me, the general feeling was that we need more, basically we need more staff, the right people in specific positions to fulfill all the missions that the town is attempting to accomplish. We shouldn't be requiring anybody to work 60 plus hours a week, sometimes 70 to 80 hours a week, just to make the town government work. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair to anybody in that position. Overall performance was very positive, with great competency in a lot of areas, and because of there'd be more to do than is possible in the available time and bandwidth. There are tough times where things don't happen exactly as you want them to, but it isn't for lack of trying. It isn't for lack of competency. It's ultimately for lack of time and resources. We as a board, I think, need to work with Angus, and we have been trying to, but we need to continue to try to figure out how do we fill in the holes in our capability to get the mission of town government done. So I don't know if anybody has anything they want to add or say on that.
I would say, Rick, you know, I found, you know, it was very, you know, in reading each of the board members' comments, I found I agreed with everything each of you said, you know, including, you know, the areas for improvement. One of the bigger challenges I've had is, you know, one of the first things they teach you as a manager is you want to delegate everything that can be delegated, because typically the manager, there's certain things that only they can deal with just by nature. And so anything that can be delegated should be delegated so that the manager can put their time toward the things that uniquely only they can do. And as he said, with the, you know, staffing structure that we have, you know, the day-to-day workload is so crushing that unfortunately I'm chained to my desk more often than I'd like. So there's things like, you know, more interaction with staff and department heads. I think that if there was a fly on the wall, they'd see there is a fair amount of that. Is it as much as it would be if I was just the town manager? Definitely not. So that's one of the challenges is despite my best efforts, I still sometimes finish a work week further behind than I was on Monday morning, even though I've like completely gone like at the red line the whole week. So that, you know, that gets frustrating. So I think that, you know, we've been having this conversation for a few years. Part of what's prevented, or I don't know about prevented, but part of why there haven't been more you know, more kind of staffing changes in terms of bandwidth or headcount is where we've had turnover in a lot of different departments. Probably 3/4 of the town departments, we've had significant staffing changes in the 3.5 years I've been here. So each of those new hires, you know, you lose something, but you also gain something. And in a lot of cases, we've been successful at broadening people's responsibilities. So we've, you know, with new hires, they've taken on things that perhaps their predecessor didn't. And so I think we've gotten more and more out of the positions that we have. But I think we've all wanted to, I know I've wanted to wait till we have some stability of the departments that we have. First of all, it takes a lot of time and attention to manage that recruitment and hiring process and get someone onboarded. But also you want to kind of wait till everyone's kind of in place, so you have some period of normalcy where you can more accurately assess the capacity relative to the demands. And we just haven't had that normalcy. You know, we haven't had any period of time that's been anything but kind of crisis mode. I will say, I think in the last couple of months, it's felt like we're gaining some traction. I feel like, knock on wood, you know, some of the turnovers behind us. Obviously, I say that knowing that we've got a police chief and a council on aging director that we're needing, you know, to replace. So yeah, it's been a very dynamic environment. But I think, you know, I know I've been hesitant to bring forward a proposal for like a new professional position until we have a really good sense that the people that we have are fully utilized. On the administrative side, I think it's very, very clear that there's a shortfall in the finance department. I think that's been clear for a long time. And when you look at comparative staffing levels, you know, I think it's very obvious, and that the 4 of us who do work in that department are all stretched to the limit, you know, just doing the day-to-day stuff. So, you know, it's been a challenging, you know, environment. I do the very best I can. I will continue to always do that. That's what I do. And you know, sometimes there's not as much to show for it as I wish there was with all of that effort. But I think that I really appreciated the comments that were offered by the board and their individual write-ups, because it gives me a lot of you know, very tangible direction on you know, what's going well and where I can focus my efforts you know, better going forward. I think that you know, one of the reasons that the way this was agended with discussion of board priorities we all know there's limited, there's a mismatch between kind of bandwidth and projects. So I think the clearer the board can be on setting clear priorities, helps me both in directing my own effort as well as the staff that I oversee. So I don't know, I don't think we're going to get into all that tonight, but, I talked to Rick earlier and we've been talking for 6 months now about the need to do some kind of a Saturday, kind of all day, just put everything on the table and figure out, what can we realistically do in the next, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and just try to be realistic. Because I hate saying no. I know that's some of what people have heard me say in the time I've been here, but that's really because I don't want to take, it's not just me personally, it's the organization. I don't want to see the organization take on commitments that it does not have the resources to then honor. Because there's nothing that makes me more frustrated than when government says it's going to do something and then it doesn't follow through. It's very easy to say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But it's the actual, the people doing the work, ideas can come quickly of like, oh, this should happen, that should happen. But it can sometimes take dozens or if not 100 hours or hundreds of staff hours to actually get it done. And so that's why, it is part of my job to try to calibrate the, policy objectives with what can we actually deliver on. And I do have, a front row seat of some of those pinch points in the organization and some of the capacity constraints. And sometimes that's due to headcount or hours. Sometimes it's, due to, competency or staff that are working to get up the learning curve but aren't there yet. Sometimes it may be due to illness or long-term absence that's invisible to the general public and should be. Those things shouldn't become a subject of public discussion, but for reasons that, for varying reasons, there are constraints on what can be delivered within any period of time. And so it is part of my job to try to impose those constraints. And part of what I need to shield against is burnout, not just of myself, but of staff. And so if I see people at the red line, really struggling, the last thing I want to do the day after meeting, oh, here's your 6 new projects. Well, what about the one, So anyhow, I think we've got a good dialogue. We have had for the whole time I've been here. And, I think we're generally in alignment on what we're trying to get done, but it's very, it's a very decentralized form of government. So the policy direction comes from a lot of different angles. So even if the select board takes its foot off the gas, that doesn't mean, that town staff aren't going to still get 10 new projects this month because they may come from other locations. So I think that ties in with, what we made some effort to do last winter and bring all the boards, committees, and commissions together. I think that's something that, needs to try to continue to be a focus, to have a shared set of priorities. So it's not just like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, because I do look at my own schedule and where the time goes. And, sometimes in the course of a week, like when I sit down and look at it, the amount of time that's gone toward, 40 different projects is, but nothing really got the amount of time it should have gotten. It's just, it's just not the right way to do things. So I think we have to have, better alignment with, what we're trying to get done and the resource to deliver on that. So yeah, I think if we could use this as a jumping off point for, kind of like a policy setting retreat, or, I think that would be a really productive thing.
We should grab a date. And I don't know if everybody's able to do that now, or what your availabilities are for a Saturday date sometime in the next month and a half or so. Is that something that?
That's doable, but I know which ones I can't do.
Okay.
Can I take a look at the the review.
Well, that's, here's like the other ones that aren't.
Oh, that's all right.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, this, and then the next one was, right there.
I'm sure this applies to all of us, but I know it applies to all of us, but sometimes these meetings, where they go till, 10:30 or 11 or later, sometimes we're all into our 15th or 16th hour of the day, if not more. I know Wendy, for one, is a very early riser. So, by 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we're probably not always at our best. And I know I'm sometimes not at my best at this hour, or not, now it's not so late, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's just one of the occupational hazards of town government
Right,
is
no,
that,
no, I think speaking for myself, I mean, I approach brain deadness somewhere between 10:30 and 11, so.
yeah.
I just like to, as I've had the longest tenure on the board, and just like this to remind people that lots of things that the town is doing now that didn't even exist 10 years ago. People, and they just, oh, that's just routine stuff. Well, we didn't do that, or even further back, but we spend a lot of time dealing with, every town does this, I understand, but there's lots of things that didn't even used to exist. There wasn't a CBA. Now we have, how many man hours do we deal with the CBA? A lot. There's one. Stormwater protection, okay? The whole country has to deal with it, I understand that. But we're a small town. We're not Lexington. We don't have all sorts of experts in lots of things. I think a lot of people think, wow, this is a, upscale community and we can do just what they do in Concord or Lexington or something. We're a much smaller place. We have way fewer employees that are doing a generalist job rather than a very specific job. So when if something that goes to Angus and it doesn't get done immediately, or I wish Angus would say, no, we can't do that. And Angus doesn't like to do that. That's because we're a town of 4,000 people. We're not a large town of 40,000 people with a lot more staff to handle new things. There's so many new things that we're. I just had a couple more that they just went out of my head, but the town didn't even know what it was 10 years ago, and now it's part of the norm. Okay, we have an OPEB that we have to deal with. No one even knew what that was. Okay, we have probably the best one in the Commonwealth. But all of these things take time and they're all new. And so that how do we deal with the stuff that we did 20 years ago, and we still need none of those things, nothing ever goes away. We only get more tasks. So that's something to think about. We always get more tasks. I don't think of any federal regulation, Commonwealth regulation, or stuff that's generated by us that well, we don't have to do that anymore. Maybe someday we'll get rid of the septic loan revolving account, but that's about it. That's still around. So I just want people to anybody that's listening to think about this. Even in the time that people would say, well, we have a town manager now, everything should be perfect. Well, we've got new stuff to do, even in the time that Angus has been here, that didn't exist 3 years ago. So the tasks keep getting bigger, more complicated, and reporting, all of these things. Just grant reporting. I don't know, the town has always been pretty good about doing a lot of grants. So I don't know if we do, I'd be interested to know if we're doing more grants now than we ever were. What's your feeling with that? I don't know.
Well, you know, up until 2.5 years ago, not being on the select board.
No, but you were aware of stuff. You were generating a lot of those grants.
But those were, you know, I mean, it's, yeah, I can speak for 3 grants over the course of the last 8 years or so that were because of the, what was previously the Energy Advisory Committee, you know, green community grants. Actually, come to think of it, I guess there were 2 or 3 grants for, yeah, I think there were. Yeah, there've probably been 6 or 7 grants in the last, forget about, in the last 8 years or 9 years for energy related things. Yeah, but they, I'm sure they've gone up, and yeah, they're, you know, the state programs and federal programs that didn't exist that the town has applied for grants for. And they all take administrative time.
Yeah. Well, and you know, in the midst of all that, you know, changing over the chart of accounts and the accounting software, I know you've been hearing that about that ad nauseum, but that's, you know, it's hard to overstate how, I mean, it's really actually like, it's hard to overstate how incredibly difficult that was when really on the finance side, my primary support person, the town accountant, or now town accountant business manager, spent, in her own words, thousands of, I don't know if it was thousands of hours or many, it was many hundreds of hours. Maybe it was 1,000 hours, maybe it was 2,000, I don't know. It was an unbelievable amount of time, you know, walking into that process where it was only 25% done by her predecessor and having to reconcile, you know, we had a 40-page chart of accounts, single-spaced, 40-page, single-spaced, having to reconcile the balances to carry over from one fiscal year to the next and get everything posted properly and have it hit on the expense ledger and the general ledger properly, and the things weren't tied. I mean, it was like a Gordian knot of complexity. And so, you know, when you're spending, you know, so much of the workday working on just the very, what may seem trivial, but is enormously important, and the auditor will crush you if you don't get it right, but you're not getting balances to tie. Then you go into a meeting that night and you have 8 new assignments. It's like, guys, I don't know if you understand how far behind, like, anyhow, there were things like that during the time here that were so unbelievably, you know, things were so out of whack. And so getting them cleaned up, and, you know, I think
So is the chart of accounts actually ultimately better? Or
oh yeah,
I hope so.
yeah, oh yeah, no, it's 100 times, yeah, because in the old days they would just create a new account for like there were, and some accounts had 6 digits, some had 24 digits.
Some had 15.
Yeah, there was no rhyme or reason. They didn't flow in any logical order. They didn't follow any kind of standardized, you know, naming protocols. I mean, you know, Lori Ziviak, you know, she would do enormous amount of research on trying to track down, like, okay, this money appears in here, but there's no paper, there's no records that, you know, we'd find grant monies from 15 years prior that'd been sitting there. I mean, it was a mess. Anyhow, you know, and some of the other baseline things like contracting and procurement and getting insurance certificates from every vendor, having W-9s for every vendor. I can promise you those things were not happening when I got here. So there's just core baseline things that were not happening, or at least were not happening consistently. And we've tightened up every single one of those, and that all takes staff time. So this finite head count has spent more and more time doing the things that maybe weren't taking as long before, but they weren't getting done. They weren't getting done, or they weren't getting done well, you know. And so, yeah, I don't know, it's hard to summarize, but it's been a tough slog because it was not a well-oiled machine. It was really kind of you know, with the 5 town accountants and 4 finance directors in the 5 years prior to my start, it was a revolving door. We had interim people come in for 3 months and leave. There was no continuity. The policies and procedures that were written, you know, weren't even meaningful because there had been so much turnover. The implementation of them had been different. So yeah, it's been difficult for sure. But you know, I think we've gained some traction. We've definitely gotten a lot done. There is a lot to show for all of that effort, but it's not. You know, we're typically so focused on the next deadline that we don't ever really step back and look at the big picture because we're very, very deadline driven. Constantly rushing.
Right, which is not a great way to have to operate. So back to picking a date. Do we want to try to pick a date tonight, or should we maybe forward dates to Angus that work and see if we can?
But why don't we just pick a date now? I mean,
Okay, that's good.
Angus, do you have any conflicts?
Yeah, so the 2 conflicts I have are the 22nd is the MMA conference in Boston. That's Saturday the 22nd, and Saturday the 15th is a special day for my family. The 16th was my dad's birthday. The 14th was my sister's birthday, neither of whom are alive. So the 15th is kind of a important day to be with family.
How would January 29th?
29th is what I was looking at. That looks good to me.
I have a dental convention.
No problem. So,
How about the 5th?
the 5th?
Works for me.
That would work well. That looks good.
Let's grab the 5th then. The 5th, not a 5th.
Did you guys want to do a backup date in case something wasn't on someone's calendar?
I don't think I need to. Does anybody else?
No.
I think that sounds good. Great. So details TBD, but no, it is good. Yeah. So details TBD, but assume it'll be, you know, better part of the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll do everything I can ahead of time to circulate materials that we can all be productive. There is a lot of good background information that I think will help.
So what is our meeting schedule in February? Is it the 14th and the 28th?
Yeah, I can be the 14th and the 28th.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
What's that?
The 14th and the 28th in February for select board meeting?
Yep, that's what we've got.
Okay.
So I did put together, you know, just a quick list of some kind of priority projects. I don't know if tonight's the night to get into that, or I think this is really the kind of thing that we ought to focus on. But I think much of what you see on this list is already underway. Some of it is more kind of on the drawing board for longer term. But you know, a lot of the things we're doing, we either have to do legally or we have to do because it's so clear that they need to be done. You know, like the wage classifications, it's not, you don't have to do, but we have to do it. You know, there's a lot of things on this list that, I mean, they're really all priorities. And so, you know, we try to push them all forward incrementally, a little at a time. You know, I do think some things like the wage and classification study I need to just somehow block out some things and push that forward. I mean, I look at the, you know, time spent on some other things in the last month. But, you know, the requests, whether they come from a committee or a board member, you know, not a select board member, but another committee or a resident or a, you know, it's just everyone wants everything yesterday. And unfortunately, the cumulative effect is that weeks go by and you realize that, yeah, you push things forward a little bit, but you didn't get the strides that you'd hoped for on some of the things that objectively are very high priorities. We've not been successful at
So Angus, the priority projects list that you just developed, is that a subset of the list in the packet, the summary of town projects?
What I did, so back in, I cobbled it together, you know, it was only in, you know, half hour at a time. So I don't put too much stock in it, but where it came from. So in December 2020, when the board invited in the boards, commissions and committees for the kind of, you know, visioning meeting, there was a slide deck and that had 3 different slides with what at that time were kind of broadly recognized as high priorities. So I drew from that. I took off a couple of things that were on that list, which have since been completed. And then I also looked at that list that's in the packet and I tried to put just things on here that I think, you know, there might be a couple of things that maybe don't fit, but I tried to pick things that I think are kind of broadly recognized as high priorities. And I hoped I might be able to have a list of 10 or 12, and I didn't count how many bullets here. There's probably more like 25.
And you forgot the tricentennial.
You know, and I threw on a couple of these things that are, you know, like the DW contract. You know, we all, me and the board need to be aware that's something that's up these next couple of months on top of everything. You know, we're going to be bargaining a new union contract there. Memorial Day parade. Do we do one? Do we not? If we do, I can tell you from 2019, it took a couple of 100 hours of staff time, mostly my time, to do Memorial Day parade. So if we're going to do it, we now I, you know, Jim's here, Christine's here, maybe there's other people who do more of that, but at that moment in time, it fell very heavily on my desk. No one would imagine how much time it takes to do a parade. So yeah, I mean, you know, that's not like a big policy priority, but it's just one of the things that we just can't forget about.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, some of these, I mean, we could have whole discussions on some of these. I think it sure seems to be a broad sense that now is the time to initiate some kind of comprehensive master plan update. And I think it is a good time to do that. So between now and when the warrant closes, you know, we need to see it. Is that something we want to propose some funding for? And if so, how much? And, you know, there's a lot to chew on here.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these, like the ground mounted solar, I mean, Rick, you've been saying for years that needs review. Leah has been saying it needs review. Everyone knows it needs review, but years have gone by and you know, hasn't gotten done. So,
You know, I can't help but mention what I just heard this morning. listening to NPR that SWEB, the company that attempted to do the project on Coffin Street, they just started a project. I guess the first really major project in the US, like 10 megawatts up in Maine. So
Huh.
whatever that's worth. Didn't happen here.
I don't know if that's it, it's kind of, so they haven't actually done one until now.
Oh, well, I think it's their first really big one here in the US, and it's right next to a large wind development that they're doing up in Maine. Thought that was sorry to take us off track there, but
No, that's it, that's interesting.
yeah. It's a lot bigger than what was proposed here.
Angus, have you heard from Wayne about, have there been any paid school major problems with the building?
No,
I haven't heard about it.
no, there haven't. No, and it came out with a
Should've said it.
pretty clean bill of health from the ADA audit that we had done.
Yeah,
Yeah, that didn't flag any major problems, which was a little bit of a surprise to
They didn't
us.
say anything about the audit.
No.
I'll look up.
It's a good movie. I saw that on-
But you know, actually, I mean, one example on that's I've been working on for the last couple of weeks, and there's a more of a year and a half background on this one, is a potential grant, which if we decide we want to go after it, you'll hear about more later this month. But you know, we're working with Pentucket and the towns and the other two Pentucket towns. There's a grant to fund the replacement of water fountains.
Of what?
Water fountains, water bubblers.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it's enticing, like there's $3,000 per unit, but the details are, the devil's in the details, because, so, you know, it's every school is different. Within each school, the fixtures are different. They're different ages, they're different elevations. These new fountains that the state wants to see towns put in need electricity because it's like filtrated water. So, you know, there's electrical, there's the drain outlets aren't all going to be at the same height. There's going to be some masonry and things. There may be code compliance issues because if you replace some of them, but not all of them, do you take the old ones offline? And does that then change, you know, code compliance for how many?
they might have to be handicapped accessible.
Yeah, there's those kinds of things. So basically, so I met with Greg Haddon and Bob Danforth a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this grant a year or two ago, and you know, they didn't want to pursue it, but then it came up again because the grant deadline's February 11th, and so I met with Greg and Bob about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, and they spelled out exactly like all the questions that need to be answered. And so I spoke with my counterparts in Merrimack and Groveland. We all thought, you know, if we could do this, it'd be great. But we basically put it back to the district to say, you guys would need to, someone has to tell us what it's going to take to actually do it. Meaning all of that electrical and drainage and, you know, civil engineering stuff. And that we felt the district should take ownership of figuring that scope out, because we said we can go to town meeting and ask for money, but we need to know, you know, not exactly, but roughly what's it going to cost, because it's going to be a lot more than the $3,000. It might, you know, it's going to vary. And so that's, you know, and I even told Justin, if someone's going to charge you to scope it out, you know, let me know, maybe we can help with that cost, because we'd love to get it done. But one of the kickers is if you pursue the grant, you have to have spent all the funds within a year of the grant award. So if we apply for the funds in February, we get the grant, I don't know, April, we have to have it fully expended within 12 months. We're dealing with 3 different schools. You know, I told Justin, we need to be ready to award a contract like shortly after town meeting. And he's saying, or Greg Haddon's saying, they'd need most of the work to get done during the summer. Right. So it's like, it's so enticing, like, oh, there's money to do, but to actually do it. So, that's just one like little sub bullet under the Page School thing, which, maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't, but it's getting time. We're looking at it seriously. We're having meetings on it. So, yeah.
So this is a recurring grant program every year?
I don't know if it's every year. I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, but with COVID, who knows if that even, I don't know if it's every year or every 2 years, but I just heard from, Justin again today, and, he said they're going to look into getting a mechanical engineer who would actually go through each of the 3 schools, tell us which 15 fountains or whatever would be the most beneficial and generally what it would cost. So, we'll see. Maybe we go forward, maybe we don't, but it's a real project. If we do it, it's a real project. It's not a little project.
It's for all that extra bandwidth.
Right. So.
I did see biking the other day. Greenbelt has put in the little,
On the road?
on River Road, but also the one on Turkey.
Oh, have they?
Turkey,
Great.
yeah, it's just gravel, but yeah.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, that's part of the one and walk the trail for the road on New Year's Eve, actually. Good for you. Good. Great, well, anything further?
Not for me. No.
Great, well, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Just real briefly, the Page Pipe Stave, we have pinned down the date and time for the kickoff meeting, and then we just earlier this afternoon posted to the website and the social media about just to help to bring more attention to that initiative generally, because we know there's a huge amount of interest in it, and it's exciting to see that get underway.
Great.
And the principal at Page will be part of that meeting.
When is that meeting?
So that we're going to have an initial meeting at Page, and then we're going to go out and do a site visit. So it'll be a couple of hours, and that's going to be January 12th at 9 a.m. And so we'll review the scope, even though it's all finalized, but just to make sure, get everyone kind of up to speed on the scope, the timeline. This is the one funded by the state budget earmark, so it has to be fully complete by June 30th. So, there'll be a number of public meetings as part of that as well. But this will be with, we're inviting, representative from this board, from your board, from Park and Rec, people from the school, police chief, fire chief, obviously Wayne will be there, myself, West Newbury Riding and Driving Club. So we're hoping to get a good core of people for the kickoff, but it's not a public meeting, because we got to be mindful of, we don't want to have, if we have more than 10 or 12 people, you can't really have the meeting you need to have, and the site visit and all of that. But then we'll report back at the January 18th select board meeting, and then people will start to see more public discussions of that stretch of road and what might need to happen there to make it more safe.
Right.
There's no action needed. So, yeah.
So we need, for that meeting, a member of this board.
You're invited. I mean, I think it'd be, yeah, you don't need, I think it'd be great. Yeah. And, if there ended up being a couple, there's not like a hard, we're just trying to, we're trying to walk the line between trying to be inclusive of the groups that we know are interested, like the Riding and Driving Club, but trying to be clear, we can't have like you know, if we have 25 or 30 people there,
Yeah, it's
you know,
unwieldy.
it's unwieldy. And this is really as much a project management and scoping meeting, even though we've already scoped it, but it's for the consultants to see and walk around on the ground with the police chief, with the fire chief, with the DPW director, and to see what they see,
Yeah,
you know, so it's going to be a working meeting. It'll be good to get it officially kicked off.
So are you able to go, Rick?
Yeah, I think I can go if nobody else.
I can.
Okay. You want to?
No, I can't. That'd be great.
Okay, yeah, I will, I'll plan to be there. All right, well, John?
Okay.
Quick before Angus thinks of something.
All in favor? I think we gotta add a motion.
Get that, yeah.
Yeah, so, all in favor?
All right.
All right,
All right, thanks a lot.
all right, thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.